Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Date with Destiny with Captain Behnam. I have an exciting guest today. She's a female pilot and captain. Um, she has flown a Boeing 737, Boeing 757, 767, and 777 for United Airlines. She also flew the Boeing 747 as a flight engineer. And she ended up captaining Airbus. We're going to talk about that. Airbus, the good old Fifi flying machine. Um, Laura graduated from Purdue University, and she started flying in 1982. So she's been around for a long time. And on today's podcast, I wanted to get her perspective of being a female pilot and making it to the ranks of captain with United Airlines. So having said that, I'd like to welcome Captain Laura Savino. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's good. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about you. We haven't met yet, but we connected on LinkedIn, and I saw that you have written a book, Jet Boss. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, and also that you go around and do speeches, which is that's just something that is really, really I'm passionate about. And of course, I want to introduce you to the community, aviation community, in a different way that you have been introduced or exposed. And because in this show, I want to get your get the lessons you've learned in life and the challenges you've had in life to overcome to make it as a female pilot. And hopefully that would be very, very inspiring to all young women around the world who are planning or wanting to become a pilot, but somehow they never had the opportunity. So from the teenage years, you had a dream to fly the queen of the sky, which was a 747, just like myself. Your journey is really, really, really inspiring. When did you first start it, and what did you ever imagine that your career would take you so far to this point?
Oh gosh. I really didn't have a dream to go, to go to the airlines at all when I was growing up because there were no female pilots. And I'd never seen an airplane. I'd never met a pilot. I never met anyone who'd ever met a pilot. So it wasn't anything that was on my purview at all. And this was back in the day before the internet, was invented. So you only knew what was actually in your life, right? Maybe what your father, did, or your mom, if you were lucky enough to have a mom that worked outside of the home, and maybe what a teacher told you. So yeah, it was just something that I happened to kind of discover as a teenager out exploring in my mom's old station wagon. I found a GA airport, had never seen an airplane in my life, like up close. And I was fascinated by it. So that's how I got started. And then, again, I didn't fly because I wanted a career in flying, because I didn't think that was something possible. It wasn't anything that I even thought about. I just wanted to get in an airplane and, get in an airplane again. And, one thing leads to the next, and you just keep moving forward and moving forward. And then you end up someplace in your life that you're like, wow, how did I get here?
So a little girl from New Jersey, a middle child, and with a family who was like average income family. What was the turning point, do you believe, that made all of this possible?
the turning point, gosh, I don't know if there was like any specific turning point. I think what happened was I went up for $20 for a discovery flight, and it was hypnotic for me.
This was
And
like 1982 or
this
earlier
was
than that?
1982. Yeah, actually,
Okay.
right at the very beginning of 82, and in the winter. And I just wanted to go up again. And I ended up getting a job at the airport at a flight school. And I just basically worked for free and worked my way through lessons. And my end all be all goal was to earn enough money to like get to go up one more time, and
Uh-huh.
then work long enough to get to go up one more time. And probably the turning point was when I got into Purdue, and I was actually an art major, and I ended up transferring in kind of behind my parents' back, love you, mom and dad, into the flight program. And once I got in there and I realized I could do this, and I was surrounded by other people in aviation, I think that's when it became a little bit more of a reality that this really is my community, and I can be a part of this. And I just don't think I really realized it. Even then, when I graduated from college, come to think of it, I still was thinking like corporate pilot or something like that, because I don't think I understood yet that women could be actual airline pilots, but I knew I could do something professionally. At least I thought I could. So that was
So
probably
I think the deregulation happened like 78, 79.
like deregs.
Yeah. And then,
Um,
then the women started kind of entering, maybe it was a couple of years earlier. I can't remember, but and the women started kind of coming into, it was a totally a man's world. And
yeah.
here you are trying to break that barrier, and enter that. How,
Well,
were the people, the naysayers say, no, you're not good enough, you can't do it, or something like
yeah. I
that?
mean, I felt that way, and even though there women did start their, start to matriculate into aviation a little bit, probably in like the late 70s.
Uh huh.
Uh, But again, there was no internet, so I didn't know that. Nobody that I knew that. Nobody had ever seen or heard of a female pilot, so it wasn't anything that I was aware of. It wasn't. In fact, I had tried going into the military and when I was in college, and all the recruiters were like, "Well, women can't fly in the military, so you could do a support role, but you can't go in there and be a pilot." That turns out wasn't exactly true. But as far as the news had not gotten out to the recruiters that I spoke to that women actually were starting to do all these things. I think the opportunity was very small still. So, yeah, so although things were starting to change, until I literally was that change myself, I
Yep.
was unaware of it. I
It
didn't
was
know.
just
I
like
didn't know
leading a
other
pack, you
women.
didn't even know it.
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't. I, I, like those doors were just starting to open as I reached the age where I could, and the qualifications where I could walk through them. But I didn't know that there were other women ahead of me that had walked through them. It was just all new and shiny. So, I don't know. I was pretty clueless, really, as I think about it in hindsight. But that probably helped me because I wasn't jaded at all. I was just like, okay, this is great.
So
Whatever.
you get an art degree at Purdue,
Mhm.
you finish college. Did you have your private license by then, or then you started going after it?
No, so I got my private license in high school. And then
Okay.
I went to Purdue and I transferred into the flight program second semester freshman year. And then every semester we accomplished something. So
Okay.
when I graduated, I had my CFI. And then right
Okay.
after graduation, I think I then got my double I. And
Okay.
then I got to work, but I had already been working, I think, for 2 years as a flight instructor. I started flight instructing my sophomore year in college.
What kind of airplane?
Well, initially I was flight instructing just single engine, like anybody, Cessna Piper. We had oh gosh, we had oh, I can't even remember. We had a couple unusual airplanes. We had like a Mooney, and we had Bonanza, and Trinidad and Tobago, which that was like all the rage for a short period of time.
Yeah.
So all that. I never got my multi I. So just basically whatever single engine prop there was out there, I was like, I got it. I can do this.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
very cool. Very cool. Well, you've flown with some legendary airlines such as Eastern Airlines, Pan Am, and obviously United.
Hmm.
Um, and now your uniform is a Smithsonian. I mean, how cool is that? Looking
Yeah.
back, what
Actually,
does
two,
that
two
mean
of
to
my
you?
two of my uniforms. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Two of my uniforms. That guy kind of cracks me up, actually. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Actually, you want to hear a funny story about the Smithsonian? I
Yeah. How did that come about?
How did that come? Well, it came about actually through the book. So I wrote the book, and then
Yeah.
that brought some recognition, and then actually a curator from the Smithsonian had contacted me, and he's like, I flew for the regionals, Eastern and Pan Am, the regionals, although Pan Am was fully owned by Pan American Rural Airways, so I was on their seniority list.
Yep.
Um, but just word got out that I had these uniforms, and the curator asked me, "Any chance you still have them?" And I'm like, "As a matter of fact, I think I have all that stuff hanging in a closet somewhere." And I did. And they actually asked me for a lot more stuff. They wanted, I have all like the Eastern Airlines strike, all the teletypes. I had like a whole bunch of stuff from history, and I gave up some of it. I did give them my uniforms, but a lot of it I still have in boxes
And that
upstairs.
was your maternity, right? What?
No, that's something different actually. So my maternity uniform has been acquired by the Atlanta Historical Aviation Museum, I think is their title.
Okay. Okay.
But they actually are in a contract with Atlanta Hartsfield, and they are building a new exhibit called Blue Skies Breaking Barriers. And I actually did a podcast with an Eastern Airlines guy, and somebody saw me in the podcast, and then someone from the museum contacted me. I'm telling you, this is like one thing just leads to the next. And
Yep.
they're like, any chance you have a maternity uniform? Because it would be like one of the original ones. And I'm like, as a matter of fact, let me check my closet. And I did. I had all my maternity stuff. So they acquired that. They accessioned that for me. And now this is actually kind of funny.
What?
They had me go down there to measure me because they're building a mannequin of, apparently I haven't seen it yet, building a mannequin of pregnant me to go on
Well,
permanent display.
like the one that you see in the wax museum?
I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure what it's
Maybe.
made out of, but they took all my measurements and did all that. And they said it's going to go on permanent display at Atlanta Hartsfield. And I'm like, what's your definition of permanent display? They're like, well, it's a base of 25 years, but it's going to be more than 25 years, but that's the minimum. I'll be dead in 25 years. So I'm like, that's lifetime for me. So that's it. They're going to have a big unveiling of it apparently soon. They haven't yet, but I'm a little bit hesitant to to see how pregnant they made me in this. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how far into your pregnancy were you still actively sitting in the cockpit and flying?
Actually, pretty far through my pregnancies. Pretty far. Right up until I didn't have full travel. Let me think how far along. I mean, I was in my last trimester, so I can't remember how many weeks I was, but I didn't have we didn't have maternity leave, so
Yeah.
you worked if you got paid if you worked. So I had to work.
Oh,
Is what
yeah.
it came
There
down
was no
to.
maternity leave then, right?
No, there wasn't.
No.
No, so
Well,
it's like
should be really inspiring to ladies that, not only they can see you as a female pilot and captain flying a
Mhm.
major airline around the world. On top of that, hey, don't let you getting married or having
Mhm.
kids get in the way,
Mhm.
because now you can go and work in the cockpit, still fly, still take off and land.
Mhm.
And when the time comes that you make a decision that you want to go home and stay and
Mhm.
have your baby, you can do that and get maternity leave too, right?
Yeah, and it's really true. I get asked, probably the number one question I get asked by like young girls and young women is, well, how can you be a pilot and then be a mother? Like, won't that be won't that be a challenge, or won't you be compromising you know being a mom if you're still like working? And the answer is yeah, of course it's a compromise, and
Yep.
yes, of course it's a challenge. But if you give up all your dreams and your aspirations and everything you worked for to stay home full time, that's obviously a big compromise and a big challenge itself.
Yeah.
So you don't have to give up everything that you've worked for to still be a really good mom and to have fantastic kids and to do everything in your personal life that you've always wanted to do. Just because you became a parent, you don't have to give all of that up. And that's something that I think it's hard to understand. But your kids need you for about 12 or 13 years, then they're like, see you later.
Yeah.
And you live your life another hopefully 80 years outside of that. So live
Yeah.
your life, and it
You
it all
know,
works out. It all works
we're
out.
talking about goals and aspirations. I have made a decision that I want
Mhm.
to live to be 102 years old.
Only 102, that's it.
102. I don't ask me why. I wrote it down somewhere, 30 years ago. I want to be 102 years old.
Mhm.
And, I just always visualize myself sitting on this rocking chair by a log home, going back
Mhm.
and forth and looking back at my life, say, yep, did this. Yep, I did that. Yep, I did this. I keep setting new goals, and
Mhm.
I keep looking, what is life unless you kind of stick your head around the corner and see what's out there.
Yes.
If you don't have
Yeah.
dreams of aspirations. Some people say, well, I don't have it. But I said, can you visualize it? No, I can't visualize. I said, look at me. You see my necklace? You see my shirt? You see the necklace? Yes.
Yeah.
Close your eyes and see if you can see the necklace and the color of the shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can. Well, you can visualize.
You can
So
visualize.
you just have to train that muscle, visualize, and have this, manifest, have goals, have intentions, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Something that excites you. Put it out in front of you and keep going after it.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a good point. And every day too, I think, a lot of people think they have to have this like long-term end all be all goal, and which is great. I wouldn't discourage that, but you have to have a reason every single day just to say like, today I'm getting out of bed because I'm going to do this. And then at the end of the day, just feel, like celebrate whatever that was. That's how you really move forward. That's how you make progress. It's living every single day and feeling good about something, even if it's just something small that you did that day.
Yeah.
So,
and not only celebrate, Laura, not only celebrate, but reward yourself for whatever it is. Whether it's a good meal or a vacation or buy a toy or whatever, make sure that you reward yourself.
That's right. Soak in, right now, like I think a big, it's very, in vogue or whatever, to like celebrate your failures. I don't know if you're a pilot, do you really want to celebrate your failures? I don't know. I think that it's good to definitely recognize things you've done wrong so you can learn from them, but you need to celebrate, like really soak in and just sit in everything you did right. At the end of the day, say, oh, I got that right. And really give yourself credit for the things that you got right and for what, the positive things that you've brought into your life, and let that become a part of you, more so than the things that maybe, you wish you could do differently. Yeah. So.
Well, you've flown small airplanes, you've flown charter, you've flown massive Boeing 747, and a captain the Airbus A320. What was the most challenging transition? If you were coaching somebody, going through training and stuff like that, what was your most challenging transition in your career?
The most challenging. Well, I could get into going from Boeing to Airbus. We get right into that.
I can't believe you did that. Go from a real airplane to Fifi flight machines. Come on.
All right, so I'm not
like that one.
So I'm not going to play into that. I'm not going to bite. I'm not going to bite.
Well, you know what we're saying, right? You know what we say. If I ain't Boeing, I'm not going. So
until you go to Airbus and you're like, that wasn't so bad.
I bet you love that tray, right? That tray table.
You just want to go there. See, not everyone can say they've flown Boeing and Airbus.
Oh, that's true.
But let me go back just to when probably the biggest decision I had to make as far as like training and picking aircraft. When I was hired at United, I was already had an unrestricted flight engineer certificate in the 727, and I knew that 27 like the back of my hand. I got hired by United. And everybody was going flight engineer. This is back when all new hires went to the FEC, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember. Me, myself, too. I just got hired as a captain on a short commuter airliner. Mm-hmm. And when I came to United, I was sitting in the backseat, that flight engineer for 2 years.
Yeah. And we all were, right?
Yeah.
And so when I went to United, they had almost all 727 FE seats. And I was like, well, that would be a cakewalk. Because your first year, you're on probation and, all that stuff. And then they had an opening for a 747 flight engineer seat at a JFK. And I'm like, I've never seen a 747. I've never seen one up close. I've never even ridden as a passenger a 747. And this was, they didn't call it the Queen then, they called it the Whale. And
the Whale,
I'm like,
yes. And that was a rope start, right?
Yes.
Tell people what the rope start is.
The rope start, back then, everything was before computers were invented and before there was anything, any magenta lines, everything was around dial and a gauge and a swinging needle. And at United, we had, at the time that I was hired, 100s, 200s, and SPs, which was the special performance. And the flight engineer is a person who just ran all the systems. We just memorized, oh my gosh, like hundreds and hundreds of numbers, all the parameters, minimums, maximums, all the red lines, yellow lines. I mean, everything. We were the auto throttles, in takeoff, we set the thrust and the entire flight, we adjusted it. balance the fuel. We did everything. The flight engineer, a lot of companies had PFEs, professional flight engineers, that were just, technicians, and they weren't pilots. They just knew the systems and took care of the systems. But
Yeah, like
at
the
United,
TWA and Pan Am initially just had
PFEs,
PFEs,
right?
right?
And that
Yeah.
was their profession. At United, though, they made it into a seniority thing where the junior guy would sit sideways, so you had to learn that whole skill. So, any case,
It
bringing it
was a
all in here.
valuable seat though, because you sat
Yes.
back there and you observed
Oh
the
my
captain
gosh.
and the co-pilot. I mean, I learned so much.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
like you, I flew the 727 as
Yeah.
a FE and then a 747 as a FE,
Yeah.
which again, I just say to everybody that my dream became full circle
Uh-huh.
because even though I wasn't flying the right seat initially on a 747-400, but as soon as I got in the cockpit of a
Mm-hmm.
747, the rope start
Yeah.
with the round gauges, and I'm like, I have arrived. I wear
Yeah.
United pilot
Yeah.
uniform. I'm sitting in the cockpit of this jet, flying from San Francisco to
Yeah.
Honolulu and back.
Yeah.
Life was
And
good.
back then, they let the flight engineers sit up front. Like you can't get away with anything like that now. But like even as an FE, I not that I ever actually got to fly
I didn't
it.
hear that. What?
What's that? No, but it was really cool. We could do anything we wanted back then. At least
Oh
these
yeah.
guys did. But in any case, so probably the biggest upgrade decision or challenge was, should I go to the 47 on probation in New York? And not only was it just an airplane I didn't know, and I already knew the 27, but the pilots I was flying with were very, very senior, very old school. They had never flown with a female pilot in their lives. And there was a lot of challenges where the
Yeah.
27 was the very junior, captains, very junior first officers. And it would have been just a much friendlier environment and a lot
Yeah.
easier. And I knew the airplane, but I'm like, nah, you know what? I might never get a chance to do this again. I don't know how long this window is going to be open. I just kind of felt like I was handed this, like the 747, was in my new hire class. So I'm like, I'm going to take it. And everybody
Yeah.
thought I was crazy. They're like, why would you do that? You're on probation. They're going to eat you alive. And I'm
I
like,
know. Remember those days, the first year of probation, keep your nose
yeah.
clean and don't do anything wrong.
Oh, yeah. I
Don't
had to
say anything. You don't want to get fired and
sit
this
in
and
your
that.
hands and shit up. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
were
had
you
to wear my
commuting to
hair so I couldn't
JFK
take
at
my
that time?
collar. What's that?
Were you commuting to JFK or was it just a short drive for you?
No, I actually lived in Queens.
Oh,
So
you. Oh,
I lived in Queens because I was flying at a JFK with Pan Am when I got hired by United. So, which is
okay.
actually kind of funny because
So was home wasn't Queens or was it that commuter pad?
no, I actually had a house in Queens.
Oh,
I had a
okay.
house in
I
Queens. And
lived off of I lived in Queens too.
what part of
Lefferts,
Queens?
Man Metropolitan.
Metropolitan
Lefferts.
Avenue. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
Forest Hills.
Yeah,
So
Forest
we
Hills,
like
yeah.
Forest Hills
Part
area.
yeah. When after 9/11 when United closed Miami,
Hmm.
I had ended up commuting to JFK and before they closed JFK.
Yeah,
And so I had an apartment in Queens. I love that area. That's neat.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
actually lived there and that was a short commute for you.
Yeah, I lived in Forest Hills, and then I moved and I lived in Richmond Hill,
Okay.
and I was flying out of JFK, but I was also flying out of Newark. So in the 47, technically I was also based in LaGuardia, but obviously we didn't service LaGuardia in the 47. But
Okay.
yeah, it
That's
was
how you
great. It
got
was
started. Well, it
yeah,
seems like you also did repossess aircraft, or you were with the company that repossessed aircraft. Sounds like something coming out of a
it was
movie.
going back to my time building days, but yes, I was an aircraft repossessor, but I will let you in on a secret. It's not nearly as exciting as it sounds.
Oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
it's not. So it's first of all, you're not stealing anything because the bank is taking repossession of the aircraft that they now own,
Uh-huh.
and with that comes the keys to the aircraft. So I basically worked for a company, and they had contracts with the banks, and they would just give my boss who would give me like the envelope word of the information, the aircraft, where it was located, the tail number, and you'd get the keys. And I would just somebody would usually fly me there and drop me off. Sometimes I would fly somebody there and drop them off. Somebody would take turns, would take the airplane and then fly it wherever the bank wanted you to deliver it to. but
Okay.
it wasn't that
Was there
exciting,
any
especially
wild stuff was it crazy wild stuff you had to do, or the aircraft
as
owner or
a TV
somebody would
show, but
chase you guys?
it wasn't really like that. It was kind of, not that it was boring. It was just fairing. Basically, you're fairing airplanes, and nobody chased me. I mean, people that default on airplanes are usually like doctors, or people that are somehow had enough money for an airplane but didn't have enough money to keep the airplane. There was no truckers that were like chasing me or anything like that.
Okay.
And nobody. It's interesting too because I would go into these airports, and I was quite young at the time,
How old
and
were you then?
I was, oh gosh, let me think. 19, 20, 21, that
Okay.
range in there. And yeah, I'd go in, and people would chat me up, and nobody thought twice. I just looked like a teenager or something. And I had the perfect disguise, like no one suspected me of anything. So nobody ever bothered
Yeah.
me. They
The
would just be
repo
like, oh,
woman.
hi, little girl, and they'd be like all nice and everything. I'd get something out of the candy machine, and I'd walk up to the ramp and just casually walk around looking at tail numbers, trying to find the airplane I'm looking for. And then, oh, here we go. And I do a really thorough pre-flight and check, and they're supposed to leave because they know their plane's being repossessed. It's not a secret. They were
Right.
supposed to leave the logs and all the records in the airplane. So I would check and see if the paperwork was there or not. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't, and then I would just fly it back wherever I was supposed to bring it. It was kind of anticlimactic. Sorry, not that exciting,
Okay. Okay.
but
Well, yeah. Well, we briefly talked about your maternity uniform being in Atlanta on display. A lot of women that want to get into aviation, when I start talking to them, say, "Well, but I really want to be a mom. I really want to be a wife." And how did you manage that? How did you manage a career,
Mhm.
airline business, and a motherhood?
You know, I will say it is really hard. It's not an easy walk. It's a big decision to make. Um, Ideally, you marry the dream guy who wants to share the responsibility with you,
Uh
and
huh.
you take turns, and you can go to work with peace of heart and peace of mind, and all wishy and unicorns and puppy dog tails and everything, that everything's wonderful. But the truth is it's hard. It's really hard because you don't want to be separated from your children, and not everybody is blessed with the perfect spouse. Even if it's a great guy, maybe they're not good at staying home and taking care of babies. They could be the
Right.
best husband in the world, but maybe that's not their skill set. So but I'm not sounding very positive, am I? But the bottom line is you absolutely can make it work, and don't be discouraged because it's not going to be easy. But I ended up finding I had a number of nannies, like over different years, and kind of settled in. We had an older woman, not that old in hindsight,
Uh
probably
huh.
like the age that I am now, but she had three grown daughters, and she was wonderful. She was like a grandma to my kids, and she loved them. Like she just ate them up like they were her grandbabies. And she was really comfortable in my home. And so I figured out that you have to find somebody who loves your kids. You cannot leave your children with someone that's just like paid help, because you just
Right.
will be
Right.
tormented the whole time you're gone. You have
Right.
to feel like when I'm gone, somebody is loving my children. And if you can find that, and you can, I literally found this nanny through an ad in the newspaper that I ran in the newspaper. Um, when you find that, you can then continue to live your life. And oh, my battery. Hold on. I'm so sorry. My battery. Let me just plug this in.
Oh, it's all right. It's all
I
right. It
think
happens.
yeah. Well, I fully charged it right before we started, so I don't know why that is. All right.
Okay.
Is that better?
Oh, that perfect. Um, was your husband in aviation, or what, did he have a different
Um,
kind of career?
yes and no. And I make it a policy I do not talk about my ex-husband. That's like just my private business, and I just don't ever go there.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. No, that sounds good. That sounds
Yeah,
good.
he's
So,
not been in my life for decades, and it's my past, and it's just not part of my picture anymore. So.
okay, okay. You're very passionate about mentoring young pilots.
Mhm.
And what do you think is the biggest obstacle for women in aviation today? What do you think it is? What is it?
Gosh, the biggest obstacle. I think Well, I mean, obviously, the current political climate is very emotionally charging. And, as a pilot, you should just concentrate on being a pilot and learning
Yep.
those skills. I think probably the biggest challenge outside of that is just seeing themselves as pilots, the
Mhm.
whole like see it to be it. I think, even aside from being a female, I think if you are not born into some sort of a heritage, like an aviation heritage, it's very hard to picture yourself in the cockpit, of a 767, a 777, if you've never seen one before, if you've never met a pilot, if you don't have that as like a norm in your life, it's very hard to see yourself in that position, no matter who you are. So
Mhm.
I think that probably the biggest challenge to aviation, the biggest challenge is getting people into aviation who otherwise didn't grow up picturing themselves in aviation. And as far as like women go, I mean, half the talent in this country is female, right? So, but only
Mhm.
about 5% of pilots are female. So we're somehow missing the boat here. We need to open up the hiring pool and access and opportunity. And that's, I think, the greatest increase in safety to aviation is opening up the doors to everybody who has the ability to do it. And the only way you're going to do that is to get out there and just educate and let people see that this
Yeah.
is an actual real occupation that you can do. And not just being a pilot, which of course is the best part of aviation, but being a mechanic, being a dispatcher, being a controller. Um, there's a lot of really amazing careers in aviation. And if you don't have some sort of personal background where you grew up, where you've got a parent or someone who has exposed you to it, generally speaking, you don't know about it.
Mhm.
So, um, you know, I
Have
think,
you
yeah.
coached or talked to few people that women in general that have actually taken your advice?
Oh
Now
my
they
God,
are pilots.
yes, a
I know
lot.
you're really big in women in aviation, and
Yeah, yeah, it's a great organization. All these organizations did not exist when I was younger, and I feel so just privileged and just still like excited that I can now be in the other side. I never had the chance to be like a mentee because they didn't, that term didn't exist that I know of back then.
yep.
But now I get to, help the next generation. And honestly, there's just like nothing cooler than that. Nothing more exciting than me. And I've had many young women come up to me. Like I speak at Purdue University, my alma mater. I do different speaking engagements. And I mean, I have probably every time I've spoken, I've had one, two, or even more young girls come up to me and say, I never had any idea I could be a pilot. And then I saw your book, or I saw you on YouTube, or I saw something about you. And it's like they just didn't know. And,
Right.
and it's like, I think word has gotten out that girls can do anything. I don't think that's a secret. I don't think the younger generation, doubts themselves in that way. But I think that they just don't see themselves as pilots because they just have never seen that. And it hasn't crossed their plate yet for them uh, to look into it and see if it's something for them or not. So,
As you know, I come from a different country, and
mhm,
just being a natural U.S. citizen,
mhm,
um, and making it to be a pilot, it means a lot to a lot of men around the world because they want to do that, but the countries they live in doesn't
mhm,
have the opportunities.
mhm,
And
yeah,
here we live in the land of opportunity in the beautiful, good old United States of America. And there's so many people out there in different countries that would never ever have an opportunity like you
right,
had or I had to
right,
even make it as an airline pilot. Doesn't matter if you're male or female.
right,
So I
exactly,
always tell the kids here or younger generation that be very very appreciative where you live. The fact that you can go buy yourself an iPhone or
mhm,
get your own apartment or go buy get a job and get a car. I mean, I know PhDs in other countries,
mhm,
doctorates,
mhm,
that they live even lower than the lowest income class
mhm.
in this country. It's
Yes,
simply because the opportunities are not there. But here we have all the opportunities,
mhm,
and some
yeah.
people do not take advantage of it. A question just popped in my head. Do you think it's challenging for women like
Yes.
become a professional airline pilots. They fly this massive jumbo jets around the world. Is it? Do you think it's a challenge for them to date because
To
the
take
guys
it.
might get intimidated? The guys might get intimidated by women.
Totally.
That
I did not see that question coming. Um, is it challenging for them to date? It's challenging for anybody
I
to
mean, like,
date.
let's say you go on a date or you're in a group and they look at you and say, hey, what do you do for a living? The guy's trying to show off, talking about his big truck or, something and where he works. And then they ask you, what do you do for a living? And you say, well, I fly 777.
Yeah, I actually never told anybody. So if
Oh, you
somebody,
did
like if
it.
I went out, no, I never came up. And if someone said, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" which is a common question, I would just say I work for
Uh-huh.
the airlines, and they would just assume I was a flight attendant, and I would just let them assume I was a flight attendant, and I just having
Okay.
nothing to do with dating. I just never brought it up. And I don't even really
But at
know
some
why.
point it comes up what you do for a living, right?
Yes, but you'd be surprised how many people don't believe you, or
why, why is that?
they just think you're they just don't believe it. Or if they believe that you are a pilot, they think, right, but like you're not actually the pilot. Like you're like the assistant to the pilot. I mean, that's just the presumption. It's always been the presumption, and I kind of just like went with it. But
Oh, that's funny.
yeah, I don't think. I mean, even like my own dad. I love my dad. Love you, dad. Like he asked me years ago, but like well into my career, I'm like a captain. He's like, "Have you ever touched anything, honey, in the airplane?" And I'm like, yeah, dad, I fly the airplane." He's like, "Mm-hmm, right, but the pilot is the one that's really flying the airplane, right,
Oh
dear?"
my
And
goodness.
I'm like, well, Dad, I know I actually fly the airplane, and I don't think people take it that seriously. Honestly, maybe they do now, but when I was
Oh,
younger and
interesting.
I looked very young, I don't think anybody took it that seriously. Honestly, that wasn't
How
my experience. So I
interesting.
don't.
How
Yeah.
interesting. You know,
So they just
when I
rationalize
was
around
flying the
something.
seven, when I was flying the 747, I'm younger, about 28, 29 years old. I go to a party and something like that. People gravitate towards someone. The doctor, everybody in the men's world, all the
Yeah.
doctors, all the lawyers, all the businessmen that I've always met, when they find out you're a pilot,
Yeah.
forget Captain Behnam saving 381 lives. It's a different story now.
Yeah.
But what?
Yeah. I said, well, just forget that little detail.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm listening to you.
So when they find out you're a pilot or you fly jets or jumbo jets they gravitate towards you. They want to learn more. So initially, I used to tell people that I drive an 18-wheeler because on the
Yeah.
747 I had 18 wheels, right?
Yeah.
They look at me, they kind of size me up a little bit. You don't look like a truck driver,
You
because
actually just made a really good point. You do look the part, though, of a pilot. So you could say, I'm a pilot, I fly 47s, and people are like, oh my God, really? Tell me all about it, right? I could say the exact same thing, and they'd be like, okay, sweetie. And like, that's pretty much the response that I would get. Somebody would be like arguing with someone, like, no, I swear to God, really, I'm a captain on Airbus. Nobody really took it seriously. And
oh, how funny. Yeah,
so
so
you look great. You look the part. They're going, oh my God, this is the guy. I want to talk to him. And
plus
I
I'm a lot taller
wasn't
than you are.
disappointed. What's that?
I said, plus I'm a lot taller than you are. You told me you're like 5'4",
I'm 5'3". Thank you very much.
5'3".
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You're only I as you know, he knows I actually am sitting on I'm sitting in a booster seat in my own dining room because I was too short for my own laptop. So I have to you're laughing. These are the pre-camera pre-camera arrangements. I'm like, wait a second, I'm too
This is
small.
so people should know. You know,
Yeah.
you just have to have the drive and wanting to
Yeah.
be a pilot. Like a lot of countries, the height, the weight, the race, even the
Mm,
religion gets in the way, and that you cannot qualify. And I remember when I was a young kid and applied to the Air Force, they asked me if I had a filling in my tooth. I said, yeah, as a matter
oh
of
yeah.
fact, I had a
Yeah.
filling. They said you disqualify for just
Yeah.
having a filling in your tooth. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is something wrong with this picture.
Yeah. I was
So at
just
any
spoiled.
rate,
So yeah.
yeah. So talking about date with destiny, my date with destiny, my um, moment came, at 36,000 feet flying, from San Francisco to Honolulu, when we had the catastrophic failure on the right engine, and miraculously we were able to save 381 lives and the airplane. I always say that to people, that whatever you do in life, go the extra mile, always sharpen your saw, always do more than is asked of you to do, because you never know when you are going to be asked to perform at your best.
Mm-hmm.
Churchill says that, a tap on the shoulder when you are really
Mm-hmm.
put in a place that you really need to perform. Was there a moment in aviation that really, really tested all your skills and training?
Oh gosh, like every moment tests all your skills, don't they?
Well,
Um,
I mean, we are living in an environment that, you got to make zero mistakes. There is no, you can't just push the pause button,
yeah. And
and
it's just,
stop up there. So everything is just very dynamic.
yeah, it's exactly right. You can't pull over to the side of the road and say, let's think about this. Um, it's an interesting question. I mean, certainly there's been lots of challenges and times where you have to step up to the plate. I think the first time that really hit me, going way back when I was a flight instructor, I was with a student who was kind of a big, bulky guy, and he had an attitude, and we had an engine failure, which is not that big a deal, right? Put the nose down, go through your,
Engine failure on a single engine or
yeah,
a twin
it was
engine?
a 172, single engine
Oh,
172. I
which
had
was
had
a total
knee
loss of power.
engine fail, and you know, I know what to do. You have your training. It's like, okay, I've got this. But what I didn't count on was that student panicked. He froze on the controls and
Oh
he
my
yanked
goodness.
back, just as like an instinct. He just yanked back. And the fact that my size is what it is suddenly became an issue, where it had not been an issue in my mind up until that point. I hadn't really ever focused on, being small, right? And he overpowered me. And even though I knew what to do and I could fly the airplane, I knew all the procedures,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I wasn't, I was like, I've got this, we're good. I found a nice spot to land. I couldn't physically overcome him, physically overcoming me. And
Wow.
that was probably my first like come to Jesus moment. Was, holy crap, all the training in the world, I can't overcome this. And
Wow.
I ended up pulling the I ended up pulling the gust lock out of the seat pocket
Okay.
and beating him with it until he finally snapped out of it and let go of the controls. And then I got the nose down, but we came very, very, very close to stalling and spinning, very close.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that all the training in the world couldn't have prepared me for that moment, because I had no idea that he was going to respond like that, and that I would
Wow.
be put in the position having nothing to do with aviation or my skills or my knowledge, but just, a total, oh my God, what do I do now? So
Wow.
yeah,
You know,
that's,
um, I had a similar situation. I do martial arts, and I'm
mm-hmm.
a third-degree black belt. And Japanese style, there is a maneuver that you do with your elbow.
Yeah,
It's called empi. It could
mm-hmm.
be this way to the chin, or it
Yeah,
could be sideways to the ribs. So I'm just like you. I'm a flight instructor. Remember the old? I'm flying a 172.
mm-hmm.
We're doing maneuvers, we're doing stalls, and we do spins. And so remember the old days, we actually would practice spins in the airplanes.
Hey, when I was in high school, I would go up and I would do barrel rolls. I did a loop once or twice. I would do spins like as a student pilot, as a
They
teenager,
don't
just for
teach
fun.
that anymore.
No, you can't. But I didn't think twice about it, right? Because we were just like, nobody, we had no tail numbers on the airplane back then either. Like they were
Yeah.
like microscopically small. So
Yeah, nobody could take a picture. So
yeah, you could
here
do
we
whatever you want.
are
Yeah.
in a practice area, it'll be like 4,500 feet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I told the guys we're going to do a spin to the left, like two spins. He's a pilot now. I mean, he's got his instrument rating, going towards his commercial. And I asked him if he had spin endorsement. I mean, those days that you really needed to get an endorsement to do
Yeah.
spins. And for those of you guys, you might not know what a spin is. You get the aircraft into a nose high attitude. You increase the angle of attack to a point that the airplane starts buffing and shaking and falls out of the sky. We call it a stall. And you have to lower the nose, like Laura was saying, to gain airspeed. Now, if you don't have coordination by your feet, keep the ball in the center, the low wing could drop as you stall, and the aircraft would tumble down, or we call it a spin. And again, to come out of the spin, you just push the opposite rudder, keep the nose down. Now you're going from spinning like this to a nose dive, and gently you bring the nose up. Otherwise, if you pull up too hard, you could rip the wings off. And we've seen that on YouTube, that some guys have done that in air shows. So just like your scenario, Laura, we get into spin. So I go, okay, 1 turn, 2 turn, come out of it. He's scared, because to do the spin, you're pulling the nose back already.
Right.
And in a stall, you just got to release the back pressure so the nose drops. But because the airplane starts tumbling, the guy's scared and he's holding it back. So we go to three turns in a spin. Then the 4th and the 5th, I keep telling him, let go. Even if you just let go, the airplane would go back into a nosedive attitude. And he's not. And just like you, I'm trying to put my hand on the yoke, go the other way, he's not. So I literally elbowed him right in his wrist so hard that knocked the wind out of him. Knocked the wind out. I think we recovered about 1,500 feet. In your case, you had lost the engine. Jesus,
it was scary because, like I said, I can put it down, but I can't. I can't put it down in a spin.
Wow. I always focus on safety. No matter what. I always would show up at the simulator on time. And, a lot of times the guys, as soon as they're done with the check rides or the 3 bounces, if they're, lapsing takeoff and landings, they just want to get out of the cockpit. I've been saying this a lot on my speeches too. I always stayed behind and always went the extra mile. I would always ask the instructor to let me do 2 things. Like when you're done with the training, they say, well, is there anything else you want to see? Like you're done with the check ride, you're good to go for another 9 months. I always say, put me about 10,000 feet, 5,000 feet, about 10 miles out of San Fran, shut everything down. Whether it was a 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 777, shut everything down at night, and I'm just going to glide and land this airplane with no power. And I've never missed the runway. I always counted on my stick and rudder feel, and that came really, really handy when we lost the engine over the Pacific. Because, from 36,000 feet all the way to touchdown was manually flown. Really gingerly, really smoothly, so you wouldn't overstress the aircraft. And I've never missed San Fran. Even a few times I had to slip a 747 or a 777 to slip it to get it down, but never overshot the runway and always landed. The second thing I would always ask him to do was put me about 20,000 feet and 320 knots, auto throttle off, pilot off, flight directors off, and I would do a barrel roll to the right and a barrel roll to the left. Again, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 777. And people say, bullshit, we don't believe you say that. I said, I've done it. So guess what I did? On my last check ride at United, I had it filmed.
Did you?
I have it filmed. I'll send it to you.
Yes,
so I'm coming over the Colorado range, right? I do a barrel roll on the 777 to the right and to the left. And since I don't work for United anymore, I might put it on social media sooner or later, one of these days. But, it's just amazing. At 320 knots, you bring the nose up to 20 degrees. And the right aileron, right rudder, and just a sweet 1G barrel roll. I always tell people, if you're sitting back there with a glass of wine, you won't even spill the darn thing. You wouldn't even know that we just did this. Anyways, it was a lot of fun. There's been you and I witnessed decades and decades of changes in aviation. Decades of changes. Where do you think the aviation safety stands right now? where what are the some of the blind spots as you and I, getting going, leaving the major airline. And I can talk about this more freely than when I did when I was working for
Yeah.
United. But I am somewhat concerned, and
Yeah.
that the changes that are happening is nobody's fault. It's just a reality of the thing.
Mhm.
People like myself with 30,000 hours of flight time and doing something remarkable in the history of aviation by saving 381 lives.
Mhm.
They say that would have been the worst aviation disaster in the United States involving one aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, there
Yeah.
have been
Sure.
cases that more people have died or perished. First of all, to be honest with you,
Mhm.
I'm getting a lot of compliments now
Mhm.
because we saved that many people.
Yes.
Unfortunately, as you know,
Yeah.
the last few months alone, whether it was the South Korean jetliner crash or what happened in DC and other
June, I
places,
would say. Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of people perished because of human error or whatever the case is. The fact that
Mhm.
we saved as many lives, people are beginning to appreciate it. So, where do you think the aviation safety stands? What are some of the blind spots, as far as you're concerned, we should watch for?
Oh gosh, I could get myself in trouble with this one. Um, First of all, I would like to note how safe flying is. I think the latest statistic I saw was 12.3 million people fly around the world every single day
Yeah,
safely. That's 365 days a year,
it's
billions,
very safe. Yeah.
millions of hours of safe flying. We've definitely increased safety in a lot of respects over the years, right? Looking back towards like Tenerife, all the modernization of aircraft and technology um, that has developed over the years has certainly increased safety in a lot of respects. I think the biggest increase to safety, just in my opinion, is the not so much the modernization of equipment, but just the tremendous advancements we've made in communication. And
Hmm.
as silly as that seems, we get ourselves in trouble with miscommunication and not understanding
Getting yourself in trouble with what?
with miscommunication. Like
Miscommunication.
you think
Okay.
about all these runway incursions, you think about all the different things, all the close calls that we've had. Uh, a huge part of that is just somebody misunderstood something, right? Even like these latest crashes, like the one that just happened in DCA, clearly there was a breakdown in communication here that caused, well, that caused that
Yeah.
tragedy.
Yeah.
As far as like what we're missing loopholes, I mean, hmm, yeah, we've had a lot of developments over the years that have given us more information,
Hmm.
right? We now have very comprehensive cockpit voice recorders. We can now go behind the scenes when there's an accident or just a mishap or an incident or something that, you know, uh, didn't lead to a tragedy but could have, and we can really dissect it and figure out what led to this incident. And most of the time, it's some sort of human factors issue, right? And that human factors could be any number of different things, from a workload to procedures to communication. And I think the cockpit voice recorder, as invasive as it may be, has given us a lot of really good information to get to the bottom of what needs to be changed. I think a loophole is that part of the investigation doesn't extend outside of the cockpit.
Hmm.
And, like, for example, we have area mics in the cockpit. So we know, other than what is being communicated over the radio, what other things are going on that may have contributed to the mistakes that were made. But we don't
Hmm.
have the exact same equivalent in, say, an air traffic control facility where you have 5 or 6 people, say, in a small area, and
Or
some
just one
mistake is made.
controller managing too many different things.
Well,
I
right,
think
but we don't know that
complacency and
because that's the assumption, but we don't know because we don't know, and that's the
no,
point.
I'm not talking about the DCA crash, but in
In
most
any of them,
cases, I've been to airports that
yeah.
the clearance, ground, tower, all one same person because everybody else is gone, and because we have become complacent, and because we think that this is a SOP every night, nothing's going to change. But that's what it gets you. 9 out of 10. in cases 9 out of 10, nothing happens. And when it happens one time, is a coordinated stuff that happens. Is accident just not an accident? Like I was talking to Peter, a mentor pilot. He said, you got to go back on the ground before this whole thing started, in the flight planning phase, to see how everything led for this two trends to meet and create that accident.
Right, and
And
that's exactly the point you made it beautifully that I'm making, is that
mhm,
there are so many holes in the Swiss cheese that lead up to whatever the ultimate incident is, right?
yeah,
And but we just don't know. We don't
yeah,
know that piece of the puzzle is what I'm trying to say, and it's such really good information to have. Like in the cockpit, you have two trained professionals in a sterile environment, and
yeah,
still we get really good information in that small little bubble. We get very good
mhm,
information from like an area mic. Wouldn't we also get good information if it was in like a TRACON where there's 15, 16 people?
yeah,
Um, maybe there's tours going on. Maybe you have one person who has a high workload and you've got two people that are also there, but they're not contributing, or maybe the procedures need to change, or maybe communication between. I'm just saying we don't know. That's all I'm
right,
saying. A piece of
yeah,
the
no,
puzzle that is always and forever a mystery. And going all the way back to Tenerife,
mhm,
where there were three controllers, and three pilots in each of the aircraft, and we got tremendous information from the cockpit voice recorders. We learned a lot about procedures and communication, but we didn't get any
yeah,
information from that third piece in the puzzle. And I just think that everybody really, really cares about safety and really cares about keeping everybody alive. And I think it's a huge teamwork. And CRM,
right,
it has contributed to safety tremendously. And CRM started off just being the two pilots. Then they included the flight attendants. Obviously, we need to hear from them too. Then they
yeah,
included dispatchers and mechanics and even passengers. Everybody's in that loop of whatever information we can garner, let's use it. But shouldn't controllers also be in that CRM loop? Shouldn't
exactly.
that information also, it would just be helpful.
Yeah, that CRM is important, man. Not only for
Yeah.
in aviation, for air traffic control, you gotta have it with the mechanics. So
Mm-hmm.
there's checks and balances. You're always passing on the baton to the other guy, especially in hospital with doctors. And I mean, how
Mm-hmm.
many death could be prevented in hospital because of that? You also
Yeah.
talk a lot about self confidence and taking risk. How do you build that type of confidence, and what's needed to make those split decision or split second decisions? What when you refer to those things?
Oh gosh, I mean, you could answer that better than me, I'm sure. Honestly, it's experience, and it's like kind of like backing up to what we were talking about before. It's every single time you get something right, like register that, soak it in, replay the things you did right in your mind, and that continues to build confidence. That continues to change your image of yourself, in your own mind. And I always
Hmm.
kind of live by a philosophy in my life to always try to be just a little bit in over your head, because when you're in just a little bit over your head, you
Uh-huh.
are growing and you're learning and you're going to the next step, and then the next day you're going to be above water at that level, but now you're going to be at the next level. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think that's the greatest way to build self-confidence, is to just always challenge yourself, do a little bit more than you thought you could do, be a little bit unsure of yourself, and
Yeah.
you'll surprise yourself every single time. You'll pull it off, and then you just keep moving forward and just keep climbing
Yeah.
up that ladder. I think
Yeah.
that's
I always tell people life is gonna throw you a lot of curveballs.
mhm.
Don't complain about the curveball. Just become a better batter. Just
Yeah,
get better at batting it
yeah,
back,
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's how you build the confidence going forward.
yeah, yeah,
Your book,
yeah,
Jet Boss, is featured in
yeah.
Smithsonian. Good for you, Val. I'm so proud of you. You
Yeah, it's
inspired. What inspired you to write it, and what has been the most rewarding feedback you have received when people read that book and get back to you?
what inspired me to write. That's a good question. I didn't set out to write a book. It wasn't like a goal of one of these things. It wasn't a goal of mine, and then you know nothing just happens. You have to work hard towards anything, but suddenly that became something I decided to
Uh-huh.
start working towards. I think what happened with me was 9/11 happened. I was in flight training. I was actually in captain upgrade school at that time,
Okay.
and it was it was just a horrible horrible time, at the airlines. And we were in the flight training center, and we couldn't go anywhere because everything was grounded. We couldn't continue training because it was just everybody was just too traumatized to really
Yeah.
concentrate and to do that. And it was so surreal. I remember I started just writing down on my hotel stationery, like, what was happening. Like, somebody thought to use our airplanes as guided missiles.
Yeah.
Like, it was just so unbelievable, and such an emotional time. I just started
Yeah.
writing down what was happening and what I was feeling and what was going on. And that really is what led to me writing. That's what I discovered. I'm gonna keep writing about things that are happening. And then after that, I was a brand new captain, and I was based out of DCA. I was based out of Washington, right in the immediate aftermath of 9/11.
Right.
And if the air marshals, and I mean, it was a christening by fire. And
Yeah.
again, I was like, I just almost as a I don't know, it was like therapeutic. I was just writing down what was happening. And I think it occurred to me a little later that a lot of that was just history. This was a quite a time in American history.
Yeah.
And then just it was very interesting being the captain that looked like, they called me the teenage captain because I looked very young back then.
Teenage
And
captain.
the mechanics in Washington started calling me the teenage captain, and it stuck, and that became kind of like my little moniker. And nobody took me seriously, so it was really kind of comical. But then I started writing about that, like from my perspective doing this, in Washington. And I don't know, it just again, one thing led to the next, that led to the next. And even then I had written all these different, everything that was happening, and it was kind of funny and kind of serious. And I didn't think much of it until I think a little later I started to realize, like, the light bulb went off, that I had become the person that I wish I knew when I was a young girl just getting into aviation. And I didn't know anything. I had no one to ask any advice. I got pregnant. I didn't know what to do. I mean, there was just so much confusion, and like, there's no owner's manual for being a girl,
Yeah.
in this industry. And I think that was probably the catalyst that made me get serious about, what, I, I'm gonna get this printed. I'm gonna write this and get serious about this. And I
Good for
want
you. And it's not
other.
easy, is it?
No, it's a lot of
It's
work.
not. A lot of people
It's a
think it's
lot. It's
easy. No.
it's like a whole industry. It's like a cutthroat
Yep.
industry. Publishing, it really is. It was crazy. But that's it. I just decided I need to get this out there.
Yeah.
And it's now I'm in the Smithsonian. So, like, oh my gosh, it has done well, a lot better obviously than I ever thought it was going to do. So
Yeah. No,
I'm very
it is
grateful
not
for
easy, man. I'll tell you.
that.
But
Yeah.
I was thinking about it. I have a couple of more ideas that,
Mhm.
especially in success principle areas, motivational leadership, that I have so much information up here. I just have to find the time to
Mhm.
sit down and write those into my
Yeah,
next
you've
book.
got some great
Yeah.
stories.
Hey,
Yeah.
your stories are in the Chicken Soup for Souls and published by Simon and Schuster. Do you have favorite aviation story you'd like to share with us?
Do I have a favorite aviation story? Yeah, I'm in 3 of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and I'll just like just one cute one that's actually at the beginning of my book here. Just a very lighthearted one. When when my son was
Uh-huh.
in, oh my gosh, he just still cracks me. When my son was in preschool, when he was 4 years old, and he was very, very shy. As you can see, the apple does not, well, the apple can fall very far from the tree. One of my sons is outgoing, one of them is very shy. And he was in preschool, and the teacher was going around the room, crisscross applesauce. Everyone had to answer the same question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And when she got to my son, he wouldn't answer her because he was just all, nervous and didn't want to answer. And so, being very helpful and very sweet in the most sugary preschool teacher voice, she goes, "Oh, well, do you want to be a pilot?" And boy, that woke him up. He just got this look of disgust on his face. He goes, a pilot? He goes, that's a girl's job. And he was like so excited. He was so
funny.
excited that she would like infer that he should grow up to be a girl. And he
How
was
funny.
absolutely indignant at that suggestion. And
Oh my
I was
goodness.
I was a classroom volunteer, so I was like in the back of the room going, no. So it just cracked me up. But
That's funny.
out of the mouth of babes, it was the most innocent. But it just shows you perspective. Perspective really is everything, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, exactly.
all what you know growing up. What is normal for you is how you're going to see yourself in this world. And
Exactly.
that was the way he saw the world, and it was very
How
different than
interesting. How
how I saw the
interesting.
world. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a job for girls. Yep. Well,
yeah.
you built an incredible legacy in aviation, in my opinion, at least. Writing, mentoring. What's next on the horizon for you?
Hey, you want to team up?
Huh? We might cross paths somewhere because
We
I
might.
love being on the stage. I don't know if I told you or not, but last
I think,
April, I think I was in
yeah.
front of General Electric,
Uh-huh.
20,000 people. I
Yeah.
mean, I get really, really, really energized.
Yes.
And
I couldn't picture that.
yeah, well, just like some of the people that asked me to go become a keynote speaker, just for my energy, because
Uh-huh.
I can be animated. I'm not shy. I know my stuff. I've proven it. I have the self confidence and a quiet confidence. I don't have to go show it off,
Hmm.
but I absolutely love sharing.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think if you, me, and maybe Meryl somewhere, we cross
Yeah.
paths or we're same conference, would
Yeah.
be awesome.
I'm about to do book signings with Meryl out in the WAI conference is coming up.
Oh
So
yeah, when is that?
it's in Denver, the Women in Aviation conference.
Okay, got a question for you on that. But you don't allow men in there to come out and speak, right?
Um,
Have you? Has there been men?
there's like 50% of the attendees are men because they
Okay.
do a lot of interviewing and stuff, and so the men are
But
100%
as
equal.
far as the speakers, because I would love to be there to share my aviation story of what happened up there. Okay, hint, hint, hint. It's like and somebody watch this, or you have a friend and they want me come
Yeah,
talk about United 1175, because that has made pilots safer. As a
yeah,
matter
I
of
agree.
fact,
Hmm.
as a matter of fact, Captain Stevenson,
Hmm.
who flew out of Denver when the engine blew up, I
Right.
happened to run into him at the flight ops in San Fran,
Hmm.
and I have a video on it about it that I put it on
Yeah.
the my Instagram. So I knew who he was. He knew who I was,
Hmm.
and he said, "You know what? I'll watch your videos. I'll watch that animation you made
Yeah,
about United
it is really
1175."
good. I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Laura, the reason for that animation was that when they fed the information from a cockpit, not a flight data recorder, into the computers and put it in the sims, the vibration was so severe it
Yeah.
was ripping the jacks off the concrete on the sim.
Yeah.
I said, Captain, we can't teach this. This is not like
Yeah.
the wind shear thing that Delta had
Hmm.
in Dallas that we all
Hmm.
practice and learn from. They said we can't practice this. So I said, well, dial it down to 50%. Even at that point, it was too severe. It would damage the simulator. And as you know, those simulators get used 24/7,
Hmm.
and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I thought I want to share with the rest of the world what really happened up there. And Juan
Hmm.
Blanco Lurio did a phenomenal job and putting that up. And lot of pilots from
Yeah. And
many different airlines have seen
Mentor
it.
Pilot did one too, right? On your incident.
Well, he did part of it. He put that, but I mean, he did a great job. I mean,
Yeah.
his Peter did an amazing job too. And so Captain Stevens said that I had watched your video. Therefore, the lessons that I learned through you helped me with my decision making to land that airplane safely on the ground. So, which is
Yeah.
a really, really good
Yeah.
thing to remember.
Yeah.
As you
Yeah.
go
And
into your golden
your
years.
outcome was successful, right?
Yeah.
And so many lessons come out of successful outcomes. And
Yeah.
I think we don't focus enough on that. We focus a lot on when something really bad happens, what should we have done differently? But when something really bad almost happens and we pull out of it, let's figure
Yeah.
out what was done right so we can make sure that wasn't a fluke, that everyone gets that message, gets that
Yeah.
training, that information. Yeah.
Exactly. You know
Yeah.
what?
That's
We got
exactly
interviewed by FAA and TSP and the company after the incident.
Mhm.
I never forget the NTSP gentleman said, Captain, you have no idea what a pleasure it is to talk to a live captain
Yes.
and
I imagine
hearing
it
what happened.
would be, right? Yeah.
Then, rather than picking up the pieces from the bottom of the ocean, try to put them
Yeah.
together and figure out what happened. I think that was really, really important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
your
Something.
story isn't just about aviation; it's about breaking barriers and chasing big dreams. You say maybe you didn't start with a dream, but at some point,
Well, I
flying and
didn't dream
becoming a
every day.
captain,
I had
writing
so
a
much
big
dream.
book became a dream.
Yeah.
What's the secrets to pushing past the fear and doubt and go after what you want in your mind?
What's the secret to that?
Or
Gosh,
is it something that just happens?
I mean, it's honestly, it's kind of like what we were saying before. It's just taking every day and whatever you get right, focus on that and learn from that and try to repeat that. It's kind of like, whatever hand you're dealt, right? We're
Yeah.
all dealt a different hand, and playing your cards to the absolute best of your ability. What I found that what has gotten me really far in life is whenever I'm given an opportunity, I just take it and I run. I run with
Okay.
it. And whenever I have a chance to succeed at something, I do everything I can possibly do to make it work. And then when I've done everything I can possibly think of, I do a little bit more. And
Yes.
if you
Always
just
going the extra mile, like I call it. Always going the extra mile.
You just have to, because you're
Yeah.
never going to really get any place, really far if you settle for, I achieved what I thought I was going to achieve, or I set this goal and I met this goal. You can't be happy. You have to keep moving the goalpost.
Yeah.
I mean, the more you move it, the more you realize that what you can do.
Yeah.
And I mean, kind of like that's been the secret with me is I've never been satisfied with, like I get on with, United. Well, now I want to move up to this airplane. I'm Boeing. I'm like, well, I want to try Airbus, right? You have to just keep moving the goalposts to
Keep
bigger
moving.
and better
Yeah.
things.
Keep moving it forward. Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that's kind of the key to really getting anywhere far in life. I mean, I started writing notes about 9/11 on hotel stationery and longhand, and I ended up, getting a book in
Yeah.
the Smithsonian. So you just keep moving that goalpost and keep yourself just a little bit underwater, and you know you'll achieve.
Like I wanted to be a 747 pilot since I was 9 years old.
Mhm.
Coming from a different country, there was no opportunities. There were not even I mean, there were a couple of 747 SPs for Iran Air at the time, but
Yeah.
obviously I wasn't going to become part of that. And
Hmm.
when I came to the States and became a pilot and did fly the 47, after a couple of years, I'm like, is that all there is? Is that all the thing that I dreamed about? And that's what you're talking about,
Yeah.
just
But the
setting
key to
new
my
goals,
happiness is
setting
I
new
had no
intentions. Yeah.
expectations. Yeah.
Going up from the back seat to the right seat, from the
Yeah.
right seat to the left seat, and then working your way up. And apart from that, becoming an entrepreneur, pushing yourself in that department, building a life, getting married, having
Hmm.
kids, and some of the toys that you wanted to have in life. I don't have these toys because I want to show off. These are the things I wrote down when I was like 17, 18, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Now, 40 years later, I have that
Yeah.
and is mine. Is something that
Yeah.
I worked hard at it. I worked honest. I did an honest
Yeah.
job, worked hard to get there. And right now, people ask me, well, what do you do? A lot of people say, well, I'm retired. You're not a pilot. I don't say that. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
That's what is my passion. That's
See,
what
you moved your
juices me up.
goalpost, right? You achieved
Huh?
your goal. I said
Yeah,
you moved your own goalpost. You achieved your goal, and now you're doing something that you did not expect to do 20 years ago. You have to just
exactly.
keep finding new things. And there's kind
Exactly.
of like a fine line between like squirrel and being distracted
Yeah.
versus just being open-minded and saying, I never thought about that. You know what? I'm a pilot, but I can do this also. And you just have to always be open to seeing new
Yeah.
opportunities, seeing new things, seeing new sides to yourself. I'm a dumb pilot. I'm not an author, right? Now I'm like in Barnes
Yeah.
and Noble.
Now
So,
you're, yeah, exactly. Now
you know,
you're a
you just,
writer. Now your books are out.
and
Now you're
I
doing
do a lot of talks now,
speeches,
and,
and
you know,
one thing's
gosh,
going to
gosh,
lead to another door open, another avenue in front of you. Yeah,
who
it's
knows?
exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, actually it is kind of exciting, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's really fun. I think, just backpedaling a little, I think a big key to success is to have fun, because I think anything that you enjoy doing, you're going to be good at it, and you're
Yeah.
going to put the work into it because you like being there. You like doing what you're doing. So it would
Exactly.
be really hard, I think, to be successful at something that you don't want to do or you don't enjoy doing. So
Yeah.
find the fun in it, and that's a big part of getting, like, say, like girls into STEM
Hmm.
is, take away the whiteboard and, the math, theorems and all that stuff, and give them a rocket to build.
Yeah.
Anybody, any kid, you make it fun, make it something that they want to do, make it something practical, and um, something that's in their world that they can enjoy doing, and actually, get a feeling of accomplishment from. And it's amazing what a kid can learn when it's
Right.
presented like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You and I were talking. There was something major happened in your life. You know, about your neck. Do you feel comfortable? Do you want to talk
Oh
about
yeah.
it?
Yeah. That, I mean,
Because to me, that is an incredible story, and the comeback and what you
yeah,
did
I
with
need
it.
some tea for this.
If you feel comfortable, talk about it for a few minutes. That'd be awesome.
Sure. Go
People need
ahead.
to hear that. The comeback kid here.
I'm back, kid. Yeah. So I think what you're alluding to is that years back I broke my neck,
Broke your
and
neck.
um,
Yes.
yes, and it was an incredibly significant, wrench in the tire for me in my life. I was at
Yeah.
United. Thank God they would never have hired me if I had that medical history to start with. But I was at United. I I broke my neck. I was in the hospital for quite a long time. I had multiple neurosurgeries. I had completely severed my atlas to my axis, cervical 1 to cervical 2. Completely severed it, and the damage
How
was
did
at.
it happen?
How did it happen?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's I'm not 100% sure. It was,
Okay.
I mentioned this briefly in my book. I was a captain, actually noticed there was something sticking out of the back of my neck. And back then, women were required to wear their hair up so you could see the back of my neck. And gosh, it's a really long story, but I was having different medical issues that I was kind of covering up, because I was like a pilot and everything. Nothing that was a big deal, but you don't complain about anything back then. And I ended up going to a chiropractor who took x-rays, who then turned white and got very nervous and immediately sent me to the hospital because when he took x-rays, my skull wasn't attached to my vertebrae. I had an
Wow.
internal decapitation. It's a very, I could, like, honestly write an entire book about it, but the bottom line is, suddenly my life came to a total and complete stop. I discovered that you can have all the problems in the world until you have a health problem. Then you only have one problem in the world.
Yeah.
That is the only problem you have. And it became my
Yeah. If
entire
you don't
world.
have your health, you don't have anything.
You don't, and it's interesting too, you should say that. It's a very common expression. And I used to think I knew what that meant. I used to think that what good are all the riches in the world, all the successes, if you don't have your health, right? To enjoy it. But it's
Yeah.
not actually what it means. What it means, and I had experiences to realize this, what it means is that without your health, you
Hmm.
have nothing. Literally, you don't have a job, you don't have a boyfriend, you don't have, everybody disappears. You don't, every single thing you've worked your life for is gone. You can't
Hmm.
even go to your cousin's wedding. You can't go to the family reunion. You have nothing because you're in a hospital bed and you have nothing. I couldn't brush my teeth. I
Yeah.
couldn't scratch my nose. I couldn't do anything. I had nothing. And
Wow.
that's what it came down to. And I didn't know if I would ever come back from that. I opted voluntarily to go through some extremely high risk neurosurgeries, brain surgery. And I I remember my one neurosurgeon did not recommend that I proceed. And he was like, he goes, we can do something less evasive and you will walk again and you will live your life. And he said, why don't you just like get married and have kids? But it would not have been sufficient for me to get a first class medical back. That was a much, much bigger risk, a riskier surgery. And I just remember I said to him, doctor, I said, how long have you worked to become a neurosurgeon? Like, how many years of your life have you put into getting to where you are now? And obviously very many years. And I said, well, I'm at United Airlines. I said, I have a whole lifetime at that company ahead of me, and I'm just starting out. I said, would you just say, oh, I hurt my hand. I'm going to just cover the bases to make sure that my hand is not amputated, but you're going to walk away from your career. I said, or would you go for it and take that risk to get your whole hand back so that you can continue being a neurosurgeon? And he was like, okay, point taken. And the first 2 surgeries failed. And I had a very, very long time of not knowing, if I was even going to have my life back. But in any case, the point of the story is that in the end, I didn't quit and I didn't give up. And I was very, very fortunate that I was able to recover to the level that I was able to recover. And I was in the hospital for a very long time with many other people who were not able to recover. Attitude is part of it, and part of it is just the cards that you're dealt. I remember my one neurosurgeon said to me, he said, he goes, you should be dead. He goes, or worse than that, you should be a quadriplegic. Jeez. And I thought worse than death would to be paralyzed from the neck down. And that was almost me. That was me for a while. And that was many people that I became friends with. These things happen to totally, completely normal people like me that are injured. Very few people are born with something horrific like that. And they're just regular people that were dealt a really difficult hand. So I live every single day of my life incredibly grateful because I know, I shouldn't be here. And it's hard to get me down because there's very little that can happen to you that is worse than what was supposed to happen to me. And I enjoy every minute of my life.
Wow. I love your attitude. Resilience, not giving up.
I'm lucky. I'm the luckiest. I'm the luckiest person I know. I really am. People are like, oh my God, like that was horrible. What happened to you? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I am the luckiest person. How many people, sever their skull from their vertebrae and then like go on to have the life that I ended up going on to have? So yeah, I'm very, very lucky.
Come back.
I'm not going to waste a minute of it.
That's incredible. That's incredible story. I mean, that is so powerful. I hope I'll make sure that at the beginning now of this podcast, when I do the intro, I said, you got to wait to the last couple of minutes of this video because the story you just told me and told the rest of the world, it should be really, really, really inspiring. Tell us, you got a lot of followers everywhere, and it's been a wonderful journey that you've been on. You've written a book and you do speeches. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about it? Do a little advertising for yourself.
Well, here's my book. You can.
Yes. Well, I got it but when we meet up, I'll make sure you get a sign for me. I would love to have it.
Ditto, my friend.
Sign the copy.
Yes. You can obviously read my book. It's buy it on Amazon. It's available everywhere. I do book signings on weekends at the Smithsonian. I do them downtown National in the mall and at Uverhazy, which is the one on the other side of the river here in Virginia. I'm going to be speaking at Oshkosh and WAI, and I've got a speaking thing coming up at Purdue, and I've been traveling now recently to different EAA chapters and speaking. I don't know. I love getting the word out, just you can do whatever you want to do. And it really has nothing to do with being female. It's just as a person, like whatever you want to do, like just do it. You know what I mean? If you can, you can. If you can do anything, you know, short of being in a hospital bed, honestly, if you're blessed enough that you can go for something, then just go for it. Because life, you know, at some point we're all going to be dead. And life, you know, they say life is short. Life is not short. Life is long. Life is really, really long. I
Life
mean,
is
life is so
whatever you
long.
make it to be.
There's
Yeah.
so many things you can do in one lifetime. Like there are so many things you can do. Just keep going for something new. Just keep going and just
Yes.
keep going. And I have a website.
Yeah.
Actually, if anyone's looking for aviation training on my website, it's just laurasavino747.com. And if you go to that website, I have on the last tab that you can fly. I've got, I think it's up to like $10 million in aviation scholarships. I put together a bunch of links that have like all the connections to like aviation scholarships, a lot of really good information about flight training, colleges that have aviation majors, airlines. Just it's kind of like I put everything all together on one tab. So if you have a kid or if you yourself, you know, are interested in aviation or
That's
training
awesome.
or about young eagles or anything like that, go to that last tab, laurasavino747.com, and the information's been all put together for you there. So some good stuff on there. You know,
That's awesome.
yourself out.
Well, Captain Savino, it was a pleasure to have you on board. It was a very inspiring story. I loved every minute of it. I'm sure a lot of people around the world are going to love it. And I'm sure there are going to be more stories. And hopefully our paths will cross one of these days in one of these conferences. And I get to shake your hand.
Yes, I'm sure that's going to happen. I'm sure that's going to
Yes.
happen. At one of these days, I'll be that little person that sneaks up underneath you and like hello, up there. Yeah.
Oh, you're way too funny. Well, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you for giving me a couple of hours of your time. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it has been. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me on. I feel very honored.
Absolutely. Absolutely my pleasure. Take care.